Well, good afternoon to everybody. I'm Clàudia, she's Marina, and he's Aldo, and today we are going to talk about fundamental research in mental health. First of all, according to World Health Organization, several mental disorders such as major depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia have become a largest world health problem of the 21st century. These disorders interfere with daily life, normal functioning, and causes pain for both the person with the disorder and those who care about him or her. There are many types of mental disorders, but the main types studied in our group are major depression, basically characterized by a very deep depressed mood persisting a long time, and changes in different biological functions of the individual. Secondly, bipolar disorder, characterized by cyclic mood changes from extremes high, mania, to extremes low, depression. And finally, schizophrenia, characterized by cognitive, social, and emotional impairment, and by psychotic symptoms such as delusions and hallucination, involving a loss of contact with the reality. The prevalence of the mental disorders are more higher than people may think. So, for instance, major depression, the prevalence of major depression ranges from 5 to 20%, depending on the severity of the depression. The prevalence of bipolar disorder is estimated to be around 1.5%, and for schizophrenia is 1%. So, mental disorders can happen to anyone. As you probably know, there are several famous people affected by these disorders. These disorders fell into the category of complex genetic disorders, meaning that the risk of developing these diseases are influenced by a mix of factors that include the effect of several genes, environment, and the interaction of both. In conclusion, the brain is the most complex object investigation of the history of biological science. In this sense, in our group, there are three main research lines. The first one is genetics and environment, the second one is neuroimaging and genetics, and finally, pharmacogenetics. So now, Aldo is going to...
So, I don't know where to point at. Oh, okay. So one of the subjects studied in our group is the genetics of mental health disorders. We all have a lot of genes, and more than 50% of these genes are expressed on the brain, and those give rise to how our brain functions, and partially to how our behavior is. And so in our group, we try to identify genes which are expressed in the brain, and then we try to compare people with mental disorders with healthy people, and then try to identify if there are some DNA variants in the DNA sequence which increase the risk for disease. Besides, there's a huge influence of the environment on the mental health and disease, and our group also investigates how these environmental influences take place. For instance, one of the methodological approaches used in our group involves monozygotic twins. We know that monozygotic twins have identical DNA sequences, and hence they are particularly interesting because sometimes one of the twins is healthy and happy and the other one has a disease. So we know that they have identical DNA sequences but different mental health statuses, and we wonder what are the roots of this mental disease. We want to identify which environmental exposures led to the sick twin to have the disease. And then we say that the environment has had a huge influence on how this twin got the disease. And complementarily, we also study neuroimaging using monozygotic twins. So we have, our starting point is a pair of twins who have different mental health conditions. One of them is healthy and the other is sick. And we evaluate their brain scans from a magnetic resonance imaging machine and try to determine if the environmental factors leading this twin to have a disease are also leading the same twin to have an altered brain structure or function. Now, Marina will give a brief overview of pharmacogenetics.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about pharmacogenetics, but first of all, I would like to show you the economic impact that mental health has in our society. So, brain disorders cost Europe almost 800 billion euros a year, more than cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes put together. Within all brain disorders, mood disorders and psychotic disorders are the two disorders with the highest economic impact in our society. And this is because not only of drugs, visits to doctors, hospitalizations, informal care, social service, and nursing home, but also because of the loss of productivity of the patients and as a result of time off work or early retirement. One of the reasons is the high prevalence of these disorders, but also because nowadays the achievement of an effective treatment in clinical assistance is based on some trials and errors. Trials and errors because of the lack of response to a treatment, but also because the high number of side effects of drugs in psychiatry. So here is where pharmacogenetics plays a role, trying to change these trials and errors to a tailor-made based on genetics. So pharmacogenetics, a study whereby genetic variability might influence both effectiveness of drug treatment as well as adverse effects and consequently the individual clinical response. So, if, for example, we have a group of patients and all of them, they have the same mental disorder as, for example, schizophrenia, and all of them, they are treated by the same drug, we all know that we can divide them between responders or non-responders to the drug therapy. And so here is where pharmacogenetics try to study which genetic variability can explain not only this different response to a drug, but also why some patients can develop some side effects and why other ones don't. So the final goal of pharmacogenetics is to find the right medicine to the right patient. And now just to finish, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you.